The night my mother hunted us through the parking lot of a late-night pharmacy, she drove without her headlights on. The car moved slowly, like she was searching for something she knew had to be there. When I told her on the phone that Dad had warned us not to trust her, she snapped that I was being manipulated. I remember crouching behind a dumpster with my sister beside me when the road suddenly filled with flashing red and blue lights, and my mother froze with her hand on the car door. "My name is Alyssa Morgan. I'm 16. And in that frozen moment, with headlights cutting through the dark and her voice still sharp in my ear, I realized nothing that night would ever make sense the way I thought it did. The message from my dad had arrived a little after 1:30 in the morning. I remember the time clearly because I checked it more than once. The screen on my phone was the only light in my room. Everything else was dark and quiet in that heavy way houses get in the middle of the night. At first I thought the notification was a mistake. My dad almost never texted that late. He was in Denver for work, a corporate audit for the healthcare logistics company he worked for, and when he traveled, his schedule ran like clockwork. He usually sent one quick message before going to bed. Something simple, safe. But this one wasn't like that. The message was short, just a few words. "Take Hannah and leave now. Do not trust your mother." That was it. No punctuation beyond the period, no explanation, no second message following it. I sat up in bed, staring at the screen while the brightness dimmed and brightened again as my thumb brushed it awake. For a few seconds, I honestly thought maybe I was misreading it, that maybe the sentence meant something else and my brain just hadn't caught up yet. My dad wasn't the kind of person who wrote messages like that. He was methodical, careful with language, the type who proofread texts before sending them. Even his jokes were organized. This wasn't organized. This was abrupt, urgent, almost panicked. I read the message again, slower. "Take Hannah and leave now." The words landed differently the second time, not abstract anymore, specific. Hannah, my sister. She was asleep 2 rooms down the hallway. And the last line, the one I kept circling back to, sat there like something broken in the middle of the sentence. "Do not trust your mother." My chest tightened in a way that didn't feel like regular anxiety. It was sharper than that. Like something inside my brain was trying to flip a switch from normal thinking to survival mode, but hadn't fully committed yet. For a moment, I just listened. The house was completely quiet. No footsteps, no movement from the hallway, no sound from my parents' bedroom downstairs. If my mom was awake, she wasn't moving around. My fingers moved before I'd fully decided what to do. I tapped my dad's name and pressed call. The ringing didn't even start. The call went straight to voicemail. That was the part that made my stomach drop. My dad always answered his phone. If he couldn't answer, it rang at least once or twice before switching over. He kept his phone charged obsessively. He had backup chargers in his luggage, his briefcase, even his car. Straight to voicemail meant the phone was off. Or dead. Or unreachable. I lowered the phone slowly, staring at the message again while the quiet house around me suddenly felt different. Less like a place where I lived and more like somewhere I had wandered into without realizing it. The words hadn't changed. "Take Hannah and leave now." I remember thinking, very clearly, that whatever had made my father send that message had already happened. And he hadn't sent anything since. I slipped quietly out of my room and padded down the hall toward Hannah's bedroom. Even under the dim glow of the nightlight, I could see her curled up under the blanket, her chest rising and falling in deep, perfect sleep. She was 13, and she had this uncanny ability to disappear into dreams so completely that waking her sometimes felt impossible. Tonight, though, I didn't have a choice. I gently shook her shoulder at first, thinking maybe a light nudge would do it, but she didn't stir. My heart started to hammer. I had to shake harder, whispering her name over and over, until finally her eyes fluttered open, squinting at me with confusion and sleep fog. "Hannah, we have to go. Now," I said quickly, my voice low but urgent. I didn't give her time to ask questions. I couldn't. The fear in the pit of my stomach made my words sharp and clipped. She blinked, trying to focus, and then nodded slowly, still drowsy, still confused. I could see the hesitation in her body, the part of her that wanted to protest, but I shook her hand gently. "I'm serious. Dad said we have to leave. Don't ask, just get up." We moved fast, quietly, the kind of speed that comes when every sound feels like it could give you away. I grabbed my passport folder from the drawer of my desk, the one I'd started keeping under my mattress in case of emergencies I never thought I'd actually face. I tucked in my debit card, which I kept taped inside a notebook so it wouldn't be found easily, my inhaler, and the small envelope of cash I'd been saving from tutoring jobs. Every item felt heavier than it should, like carrying pieces of a life I didn't know I'd be leaving behind. I motioned for Hannah to follow me down the narrow hallway. We paused only briefly at the side door leading to the patio, the one less obvious than the front door, the one I knew wouldn't be caught on the cameras our mother had installed recently for security. My stomach twisted as I pressed the handle down, slowly swinging the door open just enough to slip through without a sound. Outside, the night air hit me, cool and damp, carrying the smell of pine from the wooded area behind our house. It felt like stepping into a different world, one I wasn't ready for but had no choice to enter. We slipped along the edge of the patio, careful not to kick gravel or snap a twig. The house sat behind us, dark and silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator through the walls. I could feel the tension coiling in my shoulders, tightening with every second we moved further from the safety of our familiar rooms. Every step was measured, deliberate, like we were trying not to wake something that was already awake, something dangerous. By the time we reached the tree line that marked the start of the wooded trail behind the subdivision, my mind was spinning. My fingers were sticky from clutching the envelope, my lungs felt tight, like I hadn't inhaled properly in hours. But Hannah was with me, and she was awake, alert now, holding onto my hand as we vanished into the shadows of the trees. For the first time that night, I felt a sliver of agency, a terrifying, necessary kind of control. We were gone, and nothing, not even the faintest sound from the house, had stopped us. We moved through the wooded trail behind our subdivision, the branches scraping softly against our arms and the damp earth muffling the sound of our footsteps. The darkness wrapped around us, thicker than I expected, and I kept glancing back over my shoulder as if that could somehow confirm we were truly alone. Hannah's hand was tight in mine, trembling slightly, and I realized I hadn't felt that small heartbeat before. My own pulse was rattling against my ribcage in a way that made me swallow hard just to keep from panicking. I checked my phone again almost reflexively. The text had been sent less than 8 minutes before I read it. Less than 8 minutes. That was all the time my father had before whatever had happened, and now his phone went straight to voicemail. I tried calling again, my fingers numb, and again it went directly to voicemail. The thought that something might already be wrong, something serious, clamped down on me, tightening my chest like a vice. I had never felt so small, so unprepared, yet I had to keep moving. I couldn't stop, not for fear, not for confusion, not for tears. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced down, heart sinking, and saw it was from my mother. At first, the text was casual, almost mundane. "Did you take the dog out?" I nearly rolled my eyes. Like everything could be so ordinary in the middle of what I now understood was anything but ordinary. But the tone changed almost immediately. Another message appeared. "Where are you? You need to come home now." My stomach turned. And then suddenly it wasn't just a message. It was sharp, angry, demanding, threatening even. "If you don't answer me, I'll report you missing." My fingers shook as I held the phone. Hannah looked up at me, her sleepy confusion replaced by a quiet alarm. I didn't answer. I didn't dare. I could almost hear her voice when she texted, sharp, brittle, and overly controlled, as if she were performing concern rather than feeling it. My mind raced. Each word she sent felt like a step closer to us being found, a step closer to danger we didn't fully understand yet. And that fear, that tangible, creeping sense of danger, was mixed with disbelief. This was my mother. She was supposed to protect us. She was supposed to be safe. Not this. I kept my pace steady, forcing myself to think, to focus, even as Hannah stumbled slightly over a root. Her hand tightened in mine and I squeezed back. "We're okay," I whispered, mostly to keep myself from screaming. We were, not really, but we had to pretend. We had to keep moving. The messages kept coming. Quick shifts in tone, casual, demanding, threatening, like someone trying on emotions to see which would stick. I could almost hear her pacing through the house, phone in hand, her face tight with frustration. And every text made my gut twist tighter. My head throbbed, my thoughts scattered, and yet I forced them into one narrow channel. Keep walking. Don't stop. Don't look back too long. Minutes stretched, or maybe it was hours. Time felt strange, stretched thin across the cool night air, the rustle of leaves, and the low hum of the distant highway. I didn't know if she had realized we were gone yet, but I knew the second she did, she would come. And I knew we weren't ready to face that yet. Not here, not now. My phone rang, and the screen lit up with my mother's name. I froze for a second, my thumb hovering over the answer button, knowing instinctively that picking up would change everything. When I finally pressed it, her voice came through, loud and fast, but oddly rehearsed, like she had practiced the words in front of a mirror. "Alyssa," she began, and I could hear the forced tremor in her tone. "You have to come home. Your father, he's unstable. He's paranoid, seeing a therapist. You don't understand what's happening." She sounded frantic on the surface, but underneath it all, there was a strange rigidity, a controlled edge that made me hesitate. This was my mother, usually so warm, so quick to comfort, but now she was performing concern. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles whitening. "Mom, we can't. Dad," my voice faltered, because I didn't even know what had happened. I only knew he was missing, unreachable, and terrified. "He's seeing a therapist," she repeated, sharper this time, almost snapping the words at me. "He's been unstable for weeks, Alyssa. You need to come home immediately." I could hear the urgency, yes, but it didn't match the tone. There was an overperformed edge to it, a cadence like someone reading lines from a script instead of talking to her own daughter. I swallowed, heart pounding. Something was off. I noticed the inconsistencies, the flatness beneath the fear, the way her sentences were punctuated with forced breaths, the way she emphasized certain words to make them sound credible. It didn't feel right. My mind flicked back to Dad's message, the warning, the voicemail, and my gut twisted. "Hannah S. with me," I managed to say, my voice quieter now. I could hear the rustle of leaves behind the trail as we walked, and I tightened my grip on her hand. We can't come back tonight. We need to stay away." There was a pause on the other end. Then she laughed, soft but brittle, completely different from the warm laugh she sometimes used to coax Hannah into cleaning her room. "Alyssa, you're being manipulated. You don't know what's real right now. You have to trust me. Come home. This isn't what it seems." I felt a shiver run down my spine. That laugh, mechanical, like it had no connection to emotion, sealed something in me. This wasn't a moment of panic or confusion on her part. This was deliberate. And for the first time, I understood that returning home wasn't an option. Not tonight. Not ever while this fear, and whatever she was involved in, was real. I took a deep breath and said nothing else. I ended the call, feeling the weight of her phone pressing into my palm as if it were a warning. Around us, the trail stretched into the dark, a narrow, twisting corridor that seemed to demand forward movement. I kept walking, letting Hannah follow close, knowing that every step away from home was a step into uncertainty, but also a step away from danger I could no longer ignore. The decision had been made. We wouldn't go back. We slipped out of the wooded trail and onto the shoulder of the highway, the night air biting through my thin hoodie. Ahead, the fluorescent glow of a 24-hour pharmacy offered a sliver of safety, or at least, a place to pause and think without the constant brush of branches against our skin. Hannah's grip on my hand was tight, almost desperate, and I kept glancing down at her, trying to silently reassure her that we were okay, even though every fiber of me screamed otherwise. Inside, the store smelled like antiseptic and candy. The fluorescent lights were harsh, buzzing faintly above our heads. I walked quickly to the refrigerated section, choosing bottled drinks almost at random, making sure to grab enough for both of us. Cash, always cash. I rifled through the envelope I'd saved, my fingers trembling slightly as I counted bills and slid them across the counter. The cashier barely glanced up. The late-night hours meant few customers, and the hum of fluorescent light and soft pop music masked almost everything else. I paid, thanked him, and tucked the drinks under my arm. Nothing about us looked suspicious, but the adrenaline running through my veins made every small movement feel monumental. Hannah, sipping cautiously from her bottle, tugged on my sleeve. "Alyssa, look," she whispered, pointing through the large glass windows at the parking lot. My stomach dropped. A dark blue crossover moved slowly past the lot, no headlights on, the car gliding like it was weighing its options. My heart jumped. I froze, squinting through the glass. Every instinct I had screamed that I knew that car. And then it clicked. The shape, the color, the way it lingered near the edge of the lot, it was hers. My mother's vehicle. My chest constricted and I felt a flush of disbelief that made it hard to breathe. She wasn't driving erratically, she wasn't honking or panicking. She was scanning, methodically, slowly, calculating. Hannah's eyes were wide behind the glass, reflecting the dim interior light of the store. She's looking for us, she breathed, her voice shaking. I didn't need her to say it. I could feel it. The weight of her gaze outside the glass was like gravity pressing down on us, invisible but heavy. The realization settled in layers over my chest. We weren't just running away. We were being hunted. I clutched Hannah's arm, tugging her toward the side exit near the pharmacy's back doors. The quiet aisles that had felt momentarily safe now felt like a trap. Every shadow outside, every movement of that dark crossover pressed into my awareness, making each heartbeat thud in my ears. I had never felt so exposed in my life. I kept my voice low, forcing control over the tremor in my words. Stay calm, stay quiet, don't make a sound. But inside, my nerves were raw, stretched tight over an unknown edge. Each second that car lingered, each pass it made along the lot underscored the terrifying truth. This was no accident. She had found us. She was looking. And nothing we had done so far was enough to make her stop. I swallowed, trying to steady my breathing, and kept my eyes on the dark crossover as it disappeared around the corner of the pharmacy. For just a moment, there was a flicker of relief, but the instinctive tension didn't fade. I knew she would be back. We exited quickly through the side door, into the muted hum of the streetlight outside, hearts pounding, senses razor-sharp, ready for whatever came next. We had barely put a few blocks between the pharmacy and the main road when my phone buzzed again. The number was unfamiliar, something long and random that made my chest tighten. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. But the message wasn't casual. It read, "This is Special Agent Marissa Cole, FBI. Your father instructed me to contact you if you were in danger. Do not return home or involve local police." My stomach dropped. I looked at Hannah, whose wide eyes mirrored the panic I was trying to control. Her grip on my hand tightened instinctively. "FBI," I whispered, my voice barely audible. It sounded unreal. The acronyms, the authority, the weight of the words, it made the whole night feel even heavier. We were already running, already terrified, and now someone official was telling me that my next decisions carried literal consequences. I had to verify it. My phone felt too exposed, too easy to fake. I scanned the block and spotted a payphone outside a convenience store, relic of another era, but tonight it was our lifeline. I shoved the phone in my pocket and tugged Hannah along, her steps uneven on the cracked pavement. Reaching the payphone, I fumbled for coins, dropped one, swore quietly under my breath, and finally dialed the number. The line clicked, then a firm, controlled female voice answered. "This is Agent Marissa Cole." I froze for a second, caught between relief and disbelief. Her voice was calm but unmistakably authoritative, carrying the weight of certainty that cut through the chaos I'd been living in. "Agent Cole, my dad," I started, but she interrupted gently. "He's alive and he's cooperating in a federal investigation. That's why he sent the text. You and your sister are at risk because of what your mother is involved in. Do not return home. Do not call local authorities. Understand?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. My throat tightened as I tried to process her words. "My mother, what's going on?" I whispered. Her reply was steady, precise. "Your mother has been involved in financial crimes. Shell property developments, money laundering. Your father discovered irregular transfers and has been providing evidence to federal authorities. The people she works with may attempt to leverage you or your sister if necessary. That's why he warned you to leave immediately." I stumbled back a step, the phone shaking slightly in my hand. My mind was spinning. Everything I'd feared, every instinct that had made me drag Hannah out of bed, every message from our mother that had felt rehearsed, manipulative, it all clicked into place. My chest constricted, my legs felt like lead, and yet there was a sliver of clarity. The danger wasn't just in the dark of the trail, in the back of that crossover, in the flash of headlights we couldn't see yet. It was bigger, more insidious, tied to lies and betrayal I couldn't have imagined. I looked at Hannah, trying to meet her gaze without losing my own footing. Her lips trembled, but she nodded, sensing the gravity even if she didn't understand the details. I swallowed hard, tightening my grip on the payphone. Agent Cole continued, outlining details in calm, factual tones that made my mind race and reel at the same time. By the end, the full weight of the situation pressed down on me. Our mother wasn't just dangerous in a personal, emotional way, she was dangerous legally, financially, and, tonight, physically. I hung up slowly, letting the receiver drop back into its cradle. The night around us felt impossibly still, but now it carried a new urgency. This wasn't just escape anymore. This was survival. The cab pulled up to the stand almost 15 minutes after we reached the street. Its headlights cut through the darkness like twin searchlights, and for a brief moment I hesitated on the curb, watching the door swing open. Hannah clutched my arm, silent but trembling, her small body pressing close as if proximity alone could shield her from the night. I swallowed hard, counted to 3, and slid into the back seat, careful not to make any sudden movements. "Where to?" the driver asked, his voice gravelly, echoing slightly in the cab's dim interior. I fumbled with my cash envelope, handing it over immediately. "Back roads," I said, keeping my tone calm, measured, almost rehearsed, though my hands shook enough to betray me. "Avoid the highway, avoid main roads, just away from here." The driver nodded, eyes briefly meeting mine in the rearview mirror, and I could sense he didn't ask questions. In that moment I was grateful. The less he knew, the safer we were. As the cab rolled forward, the city's neon and streetlight glow blurred past, and the hum of the engine was both comforting and oppressive. Hannah clutched one of the bottled drinks to her chest, her lips pressed together as she tried not to cry. I reached over, brushing back the hair from her face, and whispered, "We're okay. We just have to stay calm, just for a little while." She nodded but didn't meet my eyes, her entire body taut, ready to spring if anything went wrong. We followed the winding side streets, the cab swaying gently over potholes and cracked pavement, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to think we might be safe. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw headlights behind us, not the soft glow of ordinary traffic, but deliberate, tracking, moving as if keeping pace with our small, vulnerable cab. My heart slammed against my ribs. The driver noticed first. He muttered something under his breath and adjusted his rearview mirror, and then it became unmistakable. That car, the dark blue crossover we had seen at the pharmacy, was following us, methodically, quietly. No flashing lights, no honking, just precision in motion. I knew without doubt whose hands were on the wheel. I grabbed Hannah's arm instinctively, squeezing it, trying to anchor her, trying to anchor myself. "It's her," I whispered, my voice trembling but barely audible over the soft rumble of the engine. "It's Mom. She's behind us." The realization hit in waves. This wasn't random. This wasn't chance. We were being hunted in broad daylight, or in this case, under the artificial glow of street lamps and cab headlights. My fingers tightened around the envelope in my lap, my knuckles white, my breath shallow. Every instinct screamed that she wouldn't stop, that every turn we took, every attempt to hide, was being calculated. I looked back again, squinting through the cab's tinted windows. The crossover maintained its distance, yet it never faltered, never slowed, never wavered. My chest constricted with a mix of fear and icy, sudden clarity. This chase wasn't a warning. This was deliberate. She knew exactly where we were, and whatever her plan was, it wasn't over. I leaned forward slightly, my voice barely a whisper to the driver. "Don't let her close." The tires crunched over the uneven road as the cab veered onto another side street, trying to break line of sight, but I knew it was a temporary reprieve. The hunt had begun, and we were in the open, exposed, and completely vulnerable. We hadn't even merged onto the highway before the first impact jolted the cab hard enough to snap our heads back against the seat. The metallic crunch reverberated through the vehicle, and Hannah screamed, her voice slicing through the night like glass. The driver swore under his breath, hands gripping the wheel as he tried to maneuver away, weaving onto the shoulder and then back into the lane, his eyes darting nervously into the rearview mirror. I could see it then, her car, that dark blue crossover, closing in with precise acceleration. No hesitation, no recklessness. Every inch she gained felt intentional, calculated. The second strike came violently, ramming the rear quarter panel and sending the cab sliding dangerously toward the shoulder. Tires squealed against the asphalt. I slammed my hands against the back of the seat instinctively, bracing myself as my chest hammered in panic and disbelief. Hannah was crying now, clutching my arm, and I barely had time to whisper her name over the roaring of my own pulse. The cab fishtailed slightly as the driver tried to regain control, muttering desperate apologies. But it was futile. Every evasive maneuver we attempted, she matched. And that's when I saw her expression through the windshield, illuminated briefly by a flicker of overhead streetlights. Focused, almost clinical, eyes locked on us as though we were targets in a simulation she couldn't afford to lose. There was no frantic pleading in her face, no sign of hesitation, just a concentrated intensity that made my stomach turn cold. My mind raced, trying to process what was happening, trying to reconcile the woman who had braided Hannah's hair and packed our lunches with the one now ramming a cab down a deserted highway. It didn't make sense, and yet every violent bump, every panic-stricken swerve, confirmed that it was her. I squeezed Hannah's hand, silently begging her to stay calm, to breathe, to survive. I forced myself to meet the driver's frantic gaze in the rearview mirror, trying to anchor him, knowing that any misstep could send all of us over the edge. The cab lurched again as the second hit pushed us further toward the shoulder, scraping against guardrails, and my stomach lurched along with it. The sound of metal against metal, the thud of impact, the repeated squeal of tires, it all blended into a nightmarish rhythm that made it impossible to think beyond the immediate danger. Every nerve in my body was on fire, adrenaline and fear coiling tighter with each passing second. I tried to memorize every detail of her face in those moments, even as terror threatened to blur it. The tight set of her jaw, the unflinching focus in her eyes, the way she leaned slightly forward, controlling her vehicle with a precision I hadn't thought her capable of. It was like watching a predator assess its prey, and the thought sent a shiver down my spine. Time slowed as the cab careened toward the shoulder again, and I realized with a sick clarity that this was no ordinary mother-daughter conflict. This was a hunt, and we were trapped in the open, vulnerable, and fully exposed. Each second stretched unbearably, the inevitability of another impact pressing down on us like the asphalt itself. The cab hit again, hard this time, and everything seemed to spin at once. The rear tires skidded across loose gravel and the asphalt gave way beneath us as the vehicle fishtailed violently, tilting partially off the road. My head slammed against the window, a sharp crack of pain that made stars bloom in my vision, and for a moment the world went white around the edges. The driver let out a strangled cry, gripping the wheel as if sheer force could undo the impact. He was slumped over for a heartbeat, stunned and frozen, as I scrambled to steady Hannah beside me, my heart hammering in my chest. Through the haze of fear, I saw her, my mother, step out of her car. Her movements were calm, deliberate, almost eerily composed after the chaos she'd just inflicted. She wasn't panicked. She wasn't apologetic. She was methodical, surveying the cab as though she were assessing some puzzle, her eyes scanning every corner, every escape route. I couldn't wait another second. With trembling hands, I shoved open the far door and grabbed Hannah's arm. She was crying and clinging to me, her small body shaking, but I yanked her out anyway, dragging her down into the drainage ditch running parallel to the road. The weeds were thick, damp with morning dew that hadn't yet dried from the night, and mud clung to our clothes as we scrambled forward, low and fast. I could hear my own ragged breathing over the sound of tires spinning and metal scraping asphalt. From just a few feet away, my mother's voice carried, sharp and unbroken by the night. "I'm protecting you, you don't understand. The FBI is manipulating you." Each word slammed into me like a physical force, the contradiction of her tone and her actions twisting my stomach into knots. Protecting us? After ramming the cab after the chaos and terror, her words didn't match what she'd just done. They couldn't, and I felt a disorienting mix of fear, disbelief, and cold anger. Hannah burrowed closer, pressing her face against my side, muffling her sobs into my sleeve. I held her tight, moving further down the ditch, scanning the shoulder and the road beyond. The sound of tires faded, but my pulse didn't. The night was alive with distant sirens, the wail of approaching patrol cars mixing with the crunch of gravel underfoot. Somewhere behind us, she had retreated or vanished, but the weight of what just happened pressed down like a stone in my chest. I stayed low, forcing Hannah to do the same, every muscle tense, ready to spring again if necessary. Her shouting had stopped, but I knew she was there, somewhere, a shadow against the dark, a threat that had just shown its full capability. It wasn't just fear for ourselves in that moment, it was the understanding that the person who was supposed to love us could also hunt us with terrifying precision. And yet, even in that overwhelming panic, I kept moving, dragging Hannah forward, each step muddy and trembling, refusing to let the night claim us completely. We crouched there, listening, waiting, mud and weeds clinging to our hands and clothes, our breaths short and sharp. The ditch was narrow and confining, but it was ours for now, our fragile temporary sanctuary. The wail of sirens pierced the damp night air, slicing through the fog of fear that still clung to the drainage ditch. My chest tightened with each approaching note, every pulse of light from the patrol cars illuminating the surrounding trees and the muddy slope where Hannah and I crouched. I kept her pressed against me, whispering soft reassurances that barely reached her quivering ears. Somewhere behind the blur of flashing red and blue, my mother's car roared and then screeched away, tires clawing at the asphalt, disappearing into the darkness as if she had vanished entirely. When the first officers arrived, they were cautious, their hands hovering near their holsters as they approached the mangled taxi and the uneven shoulder. Their faces were etched with confusion. This wasn't a simple fender bender, and they had no context for the terror that had just unfolded. "What happened here?" one of them asked, voice sharp but uncertain, scanning the skid marks and twisted metal with a professional eye. I swallowed the lump of panic rising in my throat, my fingers muddy and cold as I stepped forward, tugging Hannah slightly behind me to shield her. She tried to, my mother tried to hit us," I stammered, voice shaking but urgent. "We were in the taxi, she was following us, ramming the car. I know it sounds insane, but it's true. Please, you need to know there's more. FBI involvement. Special Agent Marissa Cole, they told us not to go home." The officers exchanged glances, hesitant, unsure how to process the mix of a teenage girl in mud-stained clothes, a terrified younger sister, and a story that sounded like something out of a nightmare. One stepped closer, lowering his flashlight slightly. "FBI," he said, his tone both skeptical and intrigued. "You need to explain this slowly. Are your parents involved in something?" Before I could finish, more cars arrived, sleek black vehicles with unmarked plates and the quiet authority of federal agents stepping out into the shoulder. One of them moved swiftly toward me, hand extended in a controlled gesture that promised safety, not accusation. "Alyssa Morgan?" a calm, precise voice asked. "We received your communication. Special Agent Cole has been monitoring. Your father is alive. He's safe, and we're here to secure you and your sister." Relief hit me in a tidal wave, though it was tempered by lingering adrenaline and disbelief. The words, "he's alive," echoed in my skull, each syllable heavy with weight and unshed tears. Hannah clung to me tighter, still shivering, but the presence of the federal agents created a buffer, a line of protection I hadn't dared to imagine in the past hour. I gestured toward the taxi and the skid marks, trying to convey everything that had happened in a rush of staccato sentences. The agents absorbed it methodically, nodding, taking notes, speaking into earpieces, and coordinating quietly among themselves. The officers who had arrived first began to step back, their confusion giving way to a tentative understanding of the situation's scale. My mother had vanished, yes, but now we were in controlled hands. The adrenaline began to shift, easing just enough for the cold to seep in, for the reality of what had happened, and what could have been, to register in a slower, sharper clarity. We remained crouched on the muddy shoulder, federal agents forming a protective perimeter around us, lights cutting through the dark like a cage of safety. Hannah's small hands held mine, her sobs now quiet whimpers, and I let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The night still hummed with tension, but for the first time, the threat had a boundary, and the knowledge that my father had survived created a fragile, undeniable tether to hope. The weeks that followed blurred into a strange, disorienting rhythm of legal briefings, interviews, and careful relocation. Special Agent Cole walked us through the labyrinthine details of what had been happening right under our noses for 6 years. A carefully orchestrated laundering scheme spanning multiple states, shell corporations, falsified accounts, and offshore transfers designed to disguise millions. The magnitude of it, how calculated it had all been, hit me in waves, each revelation heavier than the last. My mother had built an empire of deception while presenting the illusion of suburban normalcy, all while our father had quietly been cooperating with federal authorities, feeding evidence, and keeping a tenuous shield between her and us. Indictments followed in rapid succession, like a cascade that made every news alert feel personal. Each name listed, each charge filed, turned our private nightmare into public record. I remember staring at the glowing lines of text on the FBI's secure portal, Hannah tucked under my arm, realizing that the woman who had pursued us across the highway, who had driven with lethal intent, had been implicated in a web far larger than I could comprehend at 16. Meanwhile, my mother had vanished, slipping into the shadows like she had planned all along. For months, agents chased leads across borders, tracking the movements of a woman who had once seemed untouchable. Then, one morning, a message came in. She had been apprehended, safely but firmly, on the outskirts of a coastal town hundreds of miles from home. Relief was instant but complex, mixed with a lingering fear of the years of lies and the enormity of what she had done. The trial was intense and public, though the courtroom felt like another world, distant and surreal. My father's testimony was a steady anchor amid the chaos, his voice calm but weighted with emotion as he recounted his efforts to protect us, to gather evidence, and to expose the financial crimes without endangering the family any further. I watched him, listening to the tremor in his words when he spoke of the times he had feared for our lives, of nights spent wondering whether his children would ever be safe from the very person they called mother. Each admission, each carefully chosen phrase, cut through the tension like a scalpel, leaving the room quiet and attentive. The verdict arrived with an almost mechanical precision: 28 years in federal prison for orchestrating the laundering operation and endangering her family. I remember the sound of the judge's gavel echoing like a heartbeat, punctuating the sentence that confirmed a future free from the terror that had stalked us. The room was still, the air thick with a mixture of finality and disbelief, and I realized the enormity of what had been accomplished. Justice had been served, but the scars, emotional and physical, were ours to bear. Walking out of the courthouse, hand in hand with Hannah, I felt the weight of months lift slightly, replaced by a tentative clarity. My father met us outside, eyes rimmed red but steady, and for the first time since that night at the pharmacy, the story felt contained, bounded by law and consequence. He pulled us close, holding us both with the quiet intensity of someone who had lived in perpetual vigilance. In his embrace, I felt the reality of survival, the cost of truth, and the fragile possibility of a life rebuilt. The first weeks in witness protection felt like living inside a muted haze, every sound and movement measured, every glance tentative. We were relocated to a quiet town in a different state, a place where no one knew our names or our history, where the streets were familiar enough to navigate but foreign enough that nothing triggered the panic of our old life. Hannah and I moved into a modest apartment that smelled faintly of new paint and pine cleaner, our suitcases unpacked slowly, almost ceremonially, as if arranging our belongings could rearrange the chaos of the past. Therapy became a constant, not just an occasional session. At first, sitting across from someone and speaking aloud felt alien. I was 17, used to swallowing everything, processing danger alone. Slowly, the words came out, fragmented and hesitant. The terror in the cab, the spinning car, our mother's voice shouting just inches away. Hannah spoke less, but her quiet admissions, her small nods when I recounted something she'd witnessed, became a steady rhythm that anchored us both. Daily life started to stitch itself together around these sessions. School, grocery runs, homework, small dinners in, the hum of mundane routines replacing the roar of sirens in my chest. Even as life gained shape, the hardest realization clawed at me in quiet moments. The person who had hunted us, threatened our lives, and betrayed everything we trusted wasn't a stranger. She was our mother. Not a villain in a storybook, not some abstract danger, but someone who had once held us, who knew our fears, our routines, our secrets, and had chosen manipulation and greed over us. That recognition hit hardest in the mornings, when the apartment was still and Hannah was brushing her teeth, laughing softly at a joke I hadn't heard yet. I'd glance at her, at the life she deserved, and realize that our survival depended not just on escape, but on acknowledging that the woman who was supposed to protect us never would. We began reclaiming ordinary joys, small triumphs that felt almost luxurious after months of running. Hannah laughed more freely. I learned to sleep without waking at every unfamiliar sound. My father visited when it was safe, each meeting a quiet ceremony of survival and trust, a reminder that the world we'd feared could be navigated with care, vigilance, and love. And yet, the shadow of our mother's absence lingered, a fixed point in our story we couldn't rewrite. In those moments of calm, I allowed myself a slow, steady breath, feeling the weight of months fall away into a cautious relief. The danger had passed, the truth was out, and though scars remained, we were free to live forward, to construct lives defined not by fear but by choice, care, and cautious hope. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.